Good morning and welcome to this, which is, believe it or not, the 13th Firestarter Forum, so hopefully not an unlucky one. The topic for today, it really was quite interesting to try and find the right emphasis for this session, because when we asked people last month to give us suggestions for what they wanted to talk about, the topic of mental health, well-being, all the challenges of being a leader in a business relating to these topics came up quite strongly. So we think there may well be more than one session in this, but today we thought what we would concentrate on is what does looking after employee well-being really mean? So here's a quick run through of what we're going to do in the next 75 minutes or so. We're going to start with a quick poll. I'll do a little scene set then just to provoke a bit of thought. Then we have our first guest speaker, Rachel Roberts from Harrison Clark Rickaby's. We'll then do a breakout session. We then have, you'll remember last month, those of you who came on, we introduced the 5 minutes with session. We've got a little bit of inflation this month, and we're going to have a slightly longer session with Dan Moskop, who's joined us before as a guest speaker, but has some really interesting things to say on the topics we're going to talk about today. We'll then do some more polls and then have some general feedback from the breakouts before we close the session. So let's just have a really quick reminder on how these sessions work on Zoom. Everybody should be pretty familiar with it by now. You'll all have been brought on mute. Please do have your videos on, especially for the breakouts. The best view is the full screen view, which I believe is, unless you're on a super funky version of Zoom, I think it's the top right. The options are up in the top right. Breakout sessions you don't need to worry about. We will just dump you in rooms with new friends. When we're in the open forum, you will just, if we invite you to speak, we'll unmute you. Sometimes we have a bit of crossover with people unmuting themselves, but that's fine. We get around that. Any questions, you'll spot that there's a forum master or a question master in the chat. By all means, send questions to that, but the facilitators in the breakout sessions will also organize any thoughts that we have. Really good. We've got a couple of lots of new faces here today when I was checking out the attendee list. So welcome. I really hope you have a great time today, and a couple of old friends coming back as well. So thank you very much. Good to see you. So let's have a go with the first poll. So on your screen, any second now, you should see a poll come up. And this one is a multiple choice. We normally just do a bit of a test poll to get us into the swing of things. So this one, just please pick as many as you want from the list. Which of these words describe you well? So resilient, flexible, agile, adaptable, innovative, unflappable, confident, in charge of your own destiny, and if none of those suit, which thus far no one has picked none of the above, then obviously pick none of the above. So we're just going to let it roll around a little bit and just get everybody into the swing of it. We've got probably 5 or 6 more people to vote, so let's just let that go. This is one of the most efficient voting groups we've ever had. One person hasn't voted. Everybody's voted. Amazing. Brilliant. Okay, so let's have a look at the results. I'm not going to overly comment on this. I just want you just to have a bit of a look at these results as they are on the screen. Resilience obviously featuring highly, but just kind of sort of remember this in your mind, because we're going to come back to this later as we go through the session. So you may have to close this window on your screen. That's one of the things we cannot do for you. So if that window is covering my beautiful face, then obviously you can leave it there if you want. So we're going to move on now, and I'm going to set the scene a little bit just before we get going with things. So off we go. So I have to confess that this topic for me is quite a tough one. I find it quite conflicting, and it's a bit of a tug of war between this concept of the blitz spirit and something else. So if we move on to here, we've got just, I guess, the way I was brought up was sort of Catholic guilt, battling through everything, not complaining. And I really feel that I am the embodiment of keep calm and carry on. That's my personal type of approach to life. And I do have this advantage that my resting heartbeat is something crazy like 56 or 57, which never seems to change much. But this is a tug of war. It's a tug of war between this blitz spirit and also this responsibility as a business leader to have this kind of caring, putting your arm around the shoulder of people and evolving an empathizing approach to leadership and management. And one of the reasons we did that first little poll is because the audience here today, and certainly the audience that we've had over the last 12 months, has consistently demonstrated when we've asked these kind of questions, a positive outlook, a culture of resilience, a culture of getting on and doing the job, of being adaptable to the challenges facing it, especially as we've moved through the pandemic, but as much just generally in their approach to business. So that is a really consistent theme. We even got to the point where about 4 or 5 months ago, we produced a whole series of podcasts from amongst this audience of their approach to personal resilience. And if you haven't listened to those podcasts, I urge you to do so. It's some of the most fascinating stuff you'll ever listen to, just in terms of getting inside the minds of some of the people, in a good way, of some of the people in this group here today. Great interviews as well by Dave Harries, who joins us later for the interview spot. So really interestingly, we've got here fundamentally a group of positive, unflappable, adaptable, resilient people. And what comes out of this is a type of character, our resilience as leaders. But obviously, as classically people talk about, that is us, that or commonly us, and certainly the front that many of us find ourselves having to put on as business leaders. And actually, that's not necessarily what is going on in our teams. And as people say, you have to walk a mile in someone's shoes before you really understand what's going on with them. And as my father always used to say to me, you really never know. You never know what is going on behind closed doors, the challenges that people are having beyond their day-to-day work lives. And although I'd like to think I have a pretty good idea in my team, you really absolutely totally don't know the detail of what's going on. And these days, people are spending more time behind their closed doors than ever before. So absolutely, we do have this tug of war as leaders between this challenge of coping with all of this, managing the challenges put in front of us, and running a business, keeping a business functioning to deliver the profits that actually pay all the people that we're looking after. So I thought I just wanted to provoke a little bit of thought. That's my job at this point of the forums, just to set the scene a bit, start people thinking about this challenge between the natural resilience that a lot of the people here sort of peddle, I guess that's probably the right expression actually, and the challenges of finding the right way to take your responsibilities as a business owner or business leader seriously, and also find the right level of empathy with the people within your charge and your care. So I hope my thoughts have set the scene a little bit, and now it gives me great pleasure just to do a bit of an introduction for our first guest speaker, who is Rachel Roberts, who is a partner, an employment and immigration partner at Harrison Clark Rickabees, who some of you may know, some of you may not know. Harrison Clark Rickabees is a top 100 law firm. They have over 500 employees across 9 UK locations. If you check out their history on their website, it says something about starting in 1796. I'm pretty sure Rachel wasn't there in 1796. And specifically, Harrison Clark Rickabees is a merger of two firms which happened in 2013. And I remember it well because one of my good friends actually worked for, I think it was Rickaby's at the time, and came to my 40th birthday party, which does seem a long time ago, and told me all about the merger just at that point. And now she's the boss of the Cheltenham office, which is very exciting. So Rachel, she works across clients of all different sorts, from public, private, and charitable sectors, which obviously gives a really good insight to all kinds of different organisations. And as you would imagine from her specialism, mainly focuses on employment law and how businesses really get to grips with this. Beyond this, in her spare time, she has a young family, loves to run and play netball. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you now Rachel Roberts, who's going to talk to us for 10 or so minutes. So here we are, over to Rachel.
That's super. Thanks, Chris. Morning, everybody. It's great to be here today and to be talking on such a prevalent topic right now. I think there's definitely no doubting that our obligations as employers, business leaders, are going to be tested in the next few months and years to come. And how far the courts are going to take this is going to be interesting when that test case arrives. Not sure I want to be that. I'm sure none of you do either, but we'll see. I think what's important for us to understand is the framework of those obligations, because until that test case does come forward, I think that's the only basis we've got to make our decisions about our employees' health, well-being, and how our offices and workplaces are going to work. So I thought I'd just start off first with, so what are those obligations? You do have, as an employer, your overriding duty of care not to do anything that would cause foreseeable harm to your employees. So my mantra here is really just think through your decisions. An obvious one of those, which is the second bullet point there, is a health and safety. I'm sure we've all encountered this already, but I think your matrix has changed since COVID. We're no longer doing these desk-based assessments in our cozy offices. People are everywhere, here, there, and everywhere, even in different countries, and you're doing assessments of their home working environment. So how are you going to assess those people now they are remotely working? Are you actually going into their homes and setting up their screens and desks for them? Or do you simply give them a laptop and say, off you go? You're good to go. So just think about your health and safety aspects, and that will depend on the size and resource of your organisation. There's always a degree of proportionality with that. And I think the key message here for me is that don't fall into the trap of out of sight, out of mind. And employees' health and safety duty is not just about physical, it's also about mental health. And I just thought I'd just sort of illustrate that with a recent example of a case, which was Mr. Walker. Don't want to get really legal on you, but I just think this is really interesting because it was a social worker who had an excessive workload and he suffered a breakdown as a result of that. When he returned to work, he said, look, I can't deal with this excessive workload. And he was promised additional assistance, but it wasn't provided. And then as a result of that, a few months later, he suffered another breakdown. And then ultimately he was dismissed on grounds of ill health. And what the courts found here is that the employer was not liable for the first breakdown because that wasn't reasonably foreseeable, which comes back to your duty of care, has to be reasonably foreseeable. But the employer was liable and on notice of the second breakdown because they could have done something about it. So ultimately there, I'm not going to scaremonger you, but he was then awarded £175,000 in damages because it was such a flagrant breach of that duty of care and health and safety. So it's just a really illustrative example there for you to think about. Also there's the duty to provide a suitable working environment. That's quite obvious and used to be quite obvious, things like temperature, a nice working environment. But now, what does a post-COVID suitable working environment look like? Is that dwelling down into their personal circumstances, their relationships with others in their household, their internet connection even? Who knows? It remains to be seen. But a suitable working environment is definitely one of the fundamentals, as is a reasonable support. You have to support your employee to be able to do their roles, give them the right equipment, facilities, support manpower, have to redress grievances, grievance or breach of contract and could entitle an employee to consider themselves constructively dismissed. And finally there, just the mutual trust and confidence. Again, what this looks like post-COVID remains to be seen, but it essentially is that you should not conduct yourself in a manner which is likely to destroy or damage the relationship of trust and confidence. So having set out the obligations like this, I think it's quite tempting to see this is quite a burden to the business, but I want to flip that around and say, actually, this is an opportunity for us as business leaders to look at the ways we want to work. So what does that look like? I've set out there a few examples. I think for me, catalysts like the pandemic have given us this new lease. I think markets generally tend to follow each other, so you don't get that new influx of opportunity. So this opportunity of my silver lining of the pandemic is what I want to use here to say, look, this is a real chance for you to review your workspaces, how you work generally, what works for you. Do you need all that office space now? Or do you want to move to co-working spaces or collaborative working styles and funky offices? Or is it a case of there is actually no movement in your workforce and how you work, and you know that, and it's good to address that and know why there's no movement so that you can tell employees that when they come to say, oh, you know, these guys are doing this down the road, and why they should stay with you and not move. We're currently refurbishing the Cheltenham office, and I think it's going to look incredibly different in a post-COVID. It's our first post-COVID office. And I think hot desking, staff lockers, collaborative spaces, even chill-out zones are going to feature as part of our new Cheltenham look office. So it's a really quite exciting opportunity there. We also know that this is an opportunity to look at the way people work. So you've got flexible working can have a hugely positive impact on people's lives. I think most of us will probably say we have a flexible working policy of some point, but is this just playing lip service to the idea? Have you actually given it thought about how that could support your employees perform better in the workplace? And home working, again, is a really interesting one, as recently we've done a bit of research on this that says that it could actually be bad for your health. And I think prior to COVID, we found that about 3% of people felt that home working had a negative impact, whereas post-COVID, with the people we assessed, there was a 1 in 5, 17 people said they felt it had a negative impact on them during lockdown. Now, I think part of that might be because it's the permanency of it. It's 5 days a week. I think most people, when they're talking about home working, aren't necessarily talking about home working all 5-6 days a week, possibly 1 or 2 days. So it's just something to think about. I think most people like a balance there. Other things just to touch on is the vaccine. Have a think about whether you're going to mandate that in your organisation. Is it part of your wellbeing plan? Do employees have a staff forum to voice their problems, and are you using appraisals as a good way to help you find opportunities that perhaps other people can suggest to you? So just moving on there, we just want to look here at the next aspect, which is I just wanted to highlight here the doctrine of unintended consequences. I think it's just to sort of be aware of this when coming up with your plans to promote your better work-life balance, because you might end up looking at one aspect of employees' welfare, but create another. And I think a really easy one to illustrate is the home working culture. Everybody's working, got access to laptops, phones 24/7. So are there any separation from work and home life anymore? Are people's desks set up properly? Are they going to get bad backs in months to come? Or are they going to start forming mild forms of depression because they're not having personal contact? So it's just thinking about those business blind spots. And I think a particular one for the business might be equality. Are you inadvertently treating men differently, or those of a certain age, in how you're applying your flexible working or home working policies? So just bear that in mind when you're crafting those. Now, of course, with the best will in the world, I can only give you a few snippets today. I've only got 10-minute slots, so I just want to move on to my top 3 tips. My top 3 tips are, first of all, policies. They are your toolbox. I often have a debate with clients about whether they're essential or nice to have. I think the two that I've mentioned, flexible working policy and home working policy, are pretty essential now. They can set out the key arrangements for you to assess, make decisions on things that you might have ignored, who's going to pay for home equipment, how you're going to keep in touch, how will you monitor performance. The second of these is the staff release valve. And I don't know if any of you are aware of the sort of stress bucket analysis. Are we letting that water out of the bucket, or are we overfilling that bucket? So do your employees have that release valve? That can just be a staff forum, a social committee, a wellbeing committee. Have those normal forces gone underground in the pandemic? Can you reinvigorate them or bring them back in some way? And then finally, managing performance. I think let's all find new ways of measuring productivity. Targets, I think, often don't measure precisely the performance that we want to see and those behaviours we want to motivate. So I'm not suggesting targets are wrong, but often they're in place just for easy monitoring rather than motivation and well-being. So it's just tweaking your thought process on those can just help structure that. And then I'm just going to leave you with a couple of final thoughts that someone said to me a couple of days ago. We are all in this storm together, but are all in different boats. And I think we just need to remember that all of our employees do have their own unique dimensions to dealing with this pandemic. And that just really sums it up for me. And then finally, unless you have been living underground, and I just think if you're having a bad day working from home or something goes wrong, just remember this guy. I am live and I am not a cat. It was hilarious. And I don't know if any of you saw it yesterday, but if you haven't, watch the 52 seconds of the Texas court shenanigans on Zoom where the lawyer was a cat, and it's brilliant. Enjoy. And on that note, I hope it's been useful in just provoking a few thoughts for you to develop. And I'll hand you back to Chris. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you very much for doing that. That was absolutely brilliant, and really thought-provoking. I'm really looking forward to seeing the chill out spaces in a lawyer's office. That's going to be a really exciting thing to see. But there's loads to think about, and I think jumped out at me is just this reality that we're moving almost into a period of formalization, aren't we, of what's gone on, like anecdotally over the last kind of 12 months, where people have just been like not quite making it up as they go along, but just reacting. And what you're kind of expressing in a lot of ways is that, well, if this is going to be fundamentally a new mode and new way of working, it needs a whole new framework around it, I think. So yeah,
absolutely.
really
I think, yeah.
And that point about the different demographics as well, it had never really occurred to me that the fact different demographics potentially have different challenges for home working as well, which I think, and there's a potential for bias, isn't there?
Huge.
So really good, and then finally the other interesting thing was just the potentially making sort of vaccine mandatory kind of conditions for people coming into your workplace. It's again really interesting. So thank you. And what we're going to do with Rachel, when we move into the breakouts in a moment, Rachel will facilitate one of the breakouts. She's very kindly agreed or volunteered or carelessly suggested that she would be able to do that. She's going to do that. So if you're lucky enough to get Rachel in your breakout, please feel free to grill her. We'll of course send all her information out afterwards as well. And when we get to the end of this session, we'll have a sort of feedback from the breakouts, but also if in your breakouts you come up with any questions that you'd like to ask Rachel, tell the facilitator and we'll get them sort of put to Rachel at the end. So again, Rachel, for now, thank you very much. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you. So what we are going to do now, as sort of teased, is we're going to go into the breakout sessions. I shall just explain for anybody that has not done this before how they work. They're very straightforward. We magically put you into breakout rooms. I think we've got about 50 people on, so you'll probably end up in a group of sort of 5 or 6. There will be a facilitator in the room. Generally, it's a Firestarter bod but you may also get someone else like Rachel, or Dave Harries is going to do it. Dan Moscrop is going to do it as well. So you will probably find yourself with someone who puts their hand up and says, hello, I'm the facilitator at the beginning of the session. Their job is just to keep things moving, but also to garner thoughts as you go through, making sure everybody has a voice, making sure that you don't spend 14 of the 15 minutes introducing yourselves. So just be careful with that. We've seen people fall into that trap before. And we'll also just make sure that we keep some time checks going as well, just to make sure that you don't run out of time. So that's the idea. So the topic for today's breakout is as follows. What steps, and we'll send this to the room as well, so memorize it if you are so inclined, write it down, take a screenshot, whatever you want to do, but we will also send it. What steps do you plan to take over the next 3 months to demonstrate a strong focus on your employee well-being, and of course also your personal well-being? So I think this kind of leads on a little bit from what we've been talking about. It's almost a bit of a move to formalization. So the reason I've put that horizon graphic on there was just to remind me that clearly I think one of the challenges we've had over the last year has been just this sense of false horizons. It will all be over by Christmas. It will all be over by March. It will all be over by September, etc., etc. So I think we are coping. I don't know whether we've got false horizon fatigue, but we are coping with this. But I think that also just leads to this position that the formalization of what we're doing, just getting a bit straighter on something that might be a bit more permanent, both in a COVID and post-COVID world, is something we do need to think about. So just bear that in mind as well. So what steps do you plan to take over the next 3 months to demonstrate a strong focus on your employee well-being is the topic. And also please think of some questions for Rachel as you go through, and facilitators, please group those and put them in the chat. That would be really useful. So off you go. Have a great 15 minutes, and we'll see you back here when you land. Hi everybody, welcome back. I trust you had a great 15 minutes there. I had a quick look at who was in which breakouts, and it looked like it was some really interesting groups going on. So hope you all had some really good conversations, and looking forward to hearing about them later. So just a reminder to the facilitators, if you can get some sort of feedback to Matt Wheeler for him to collate, that would be really useful. Via the chat or whatever means you so desire. So, right, what we're going to do now, we're going to move on. Last month we had the new feature, the very interesting new feature of the incredibly creatively named 5 Minutes With session, where we interviewed last month Alan Tattersall and Phil Arnold, fascinating interviews, asking our great friend Dave Harries, who is a fantastic interviewer, to do that. So we've been to our branding people, had a focus group, and decided that the slightly extended session that we're going to do this month is very imaginatively going to be called 7 Minutes With. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Dave Harries, who is going to set us up for 7 Minutes with Dan Moscrop.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome to 7 Minutes With, everybody. My guest this morning, as Chris said, is Dan Moscrop. He's the founder and CEO of them.co.uk, a design agency that works at the intersection of branding and architecture. Dan himself is passionate about creating workspaces that foster productivity, creativity, collaboration, and motivation for the people that use them. Inspired by the fundamental shifts in work culture forced upon us by the pandemic, Dan and his team have launched Vision 21, a set of actions and principles loosely based around Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to ensure the new office normal, whenever it arrives, is better than the one we left behind last March. So Dan, welcome. And first of all, tell me, why did you launch Vision 21? What inspired that?
Hi, Dave. So basically, Vision 21 came off the back of everything that's happening with COVID-19. Like most of us, I learned a bit of Maslow at school, and then it was repeated again when I was at Cranfield Business School back in 2012. if we could put the slide up actually of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people are probably quite familiar with this, but when I was taught it back in 2012, I'd look at this pyramid and I'd look at the physiological. Yes, I've got a nice safe home. Thank you very much. I can afford food. Safety. Yes, I've got job security. I feel safe. Belonging. Yep. Tick. Wife, kids, got more friends than I can count. And then self-esteem. Yes, I'm good at what I'm doing. So at Cranfield, it was really all about self-actualization. And we were talking about the ego and things like that. But what happened with COVID really sort of shook us all to the core. And Maslow, actually reflecting back on it, sort of taught me a lot about why I was feeling a bit down. And when you look at the pyramid, right down to the physiological and the safety aspects, it was just whipped away from us. So all of a sudden, we went from having this sort of perfect life to being in a supermarket where there was no food on the shelves, and obviously there was a killer virus out there, and this safety aspect had disappeared too. So what I found myself doing a lot of was talking to our clients about Maslow when we were talking about their workspace, because everyone's concerned about their return to work and how to do it safely. If you look at the right-hand side of that graph, there's this is more the sort of Daniel Pink kind of terminology, but I started to realize that, you know, the physiological aspect is the environment, and your safety is all about your wellness. The belongings, the culture of your business, the self-esteem is about your self-mastery, and then self-actualization is about autonomy and a driven purpose. So what we created from this is this wheel, Maslow's wheel, where we were looking at the employee as the core of this wheel, and we broke down the physiological safety aspects and the belonging and so on into 7 different elements. Recognizing the fact that the majority of people, when they've got this big project of the return to work, it can be quite overwhelming for people. So we wanted to find a way of breaking it down into sort of bite-sized chunks, in a way that we could sort of apply it to a workplace redesign, basically.
So Dan, you know, when you first sort of came up with the idea and you started thinking of the wheel and all this sort of thing, I mean, were you talking to, you know, your colleagues and your customers and your suppliers and things like that, trying to get sort of feedback from them, so that you know, so it wasn't just theoretical, so it becomes a real thing that is useful to people?
Yes, totally. So we've got several projects on the go at the minute. There's a large building we're working on in Marble Arch, which I don't think I can say the name of the business, but they'd committed to buying this building. They've been sort of looking at what the future of the building is going to be, and we were sort of starting off on that design process where, as you can imagine, everyone's sort of thinking, well, do I need all this space anymore? What is the future of work going to look like? And there's still so many big questions going on that we needed to find a way of breaking that down. And when we came up with this as a theory, we tried to apply it to that as a project, but then I've reverse engineered it, looking at all the successful projects we've done recently for people like McKinsey & Co, British Sugar. And we found that all of these businesses that have won awards have ticked off all these items around the wheel really well.
I know you've been running a podcast for a while now, for over a year or so, over a year, I think, isn't it? And you've interviewed a lot of great architects, a lot of great people in that. So presumably you know, that also has, and by the way, I would urge you to listen to Dan's podcast. It's excellent. But the, you know, the material you're getting from that must all feed into this as well.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of stuff that, you know, the bottom 2 rungs of the pyramid, you get that the safety aspects and the physiological thing comes from the architecture. But where, as a branding agency, we find it really important and exciting is the sort of engagement with staff, which is more about belonging and esteem and self. So what we've done over the last few years is talking to some great workplace strategists, looking at, you know, how we can approach design. But more recently, we've been speaking to people about what the return to work might look like. Specifically, a really interesting conversation with a woman called Kay Sargent, and she talks about the fact that we've all been operating on adrenaline for the last year, and everyone's getting quite tired now. You know, when we first went back to work and we were working from home, people were trying to present to themselves that, you know, keep me in my job because I'm really productive. Look at all this work I'm doing. Whereas now we're sort of getting a bit tired. I'm even overhearing some conversations in my wife's work where they're saying, well, I'm tired now, I can't keep this up, you know.
Yeah. Are you going to, how is this going to develop? I mean, is there going to be a book around this? Are you going to really sort of take this to the next level?
Yeah, so the podcast, we're going to be taking each of the 7 segments. So it's 35 elements in total. For example, in physiological, you've got personal space, light, food, relaxation, air, shelter. Safeties like looking at personal security, emotional security, and well-being. And we're going to interview specialists on each of those for the podcast. There's a book currently being written at the minute, which we're hoping to get published by Reba. One of the things I wanted to offer as part of this would be, as the book starts to develop, I'll be happy to drip feed the chapters through to the Firestarter people.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Dan. And as I say, you really should listen to Dan's podcast. It's called Spacecraft, and it's available on all good providers. Dan, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed live on 7 Minutes With, and the very best of luck with Vision 21. And I think we can all learn a great deal from the pandemic, and it's fantastic that people like you are really starting to develop ideas that can help us to get through
Thanks,
this.
Dave.
So
we'll
thank
share
you
the graphics so people can start to look at how they work around that project. It's really just a device to help you sort of pick through everything that you need to consider.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. So now back to Chris at Firestarter HQ.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I love the way you looked as though you weren't going to need the whole 7 minutes and then found yourselves frantically running out of time at the end. Absolute classic. But really amazing stuff. And I think what it's just bringing home to me is that what people have talked about, the new normal. Certainly in the beginning of the pandemic, this kind of time last year, people were banding around this topic, the new normal, a little bit loosely. But it's almost now we're getting to this point where what was a blurry-ish line around new normal is starting to get a bit firmed up, a bit emboldened, and we've got this. Right, okay, we're going to have to start working out what this is going to look like properly going forward as we move through vaccination and into whatever comes next. So fascinating. So thank you, gentlemen. What we're going to do now is we're going to do some polls. So we have 4 polls for you. And any second now, the first one will be appearing on your screen. And again, we're just going to sort of take the temperature of the room with various different things. So the first question is, before today, how would you have described your approach to workplace well-being, yours and your team's? So well-structured, a clear set of tactics. You had it absolutely nailed. Something I was conscious of, but not in a very organized way. Just about okay, insufficient. So as before, just vote away. And let's just see what people. So far, no one has described what they were doing as insufficient, which is good. We've got a few people saying they're just about okay. A few people saying that they had it nailed. So here we go. It's up on the screen now for you. But not surprisingly, the majorative element was the kind of people had an awareness of it, but perhaps felt they weren't doing it in a very organized way, which I guess plays a little bit to what we've been talking about today. So let's move on to the next poll, which is the other side of this coin, which is after today. Has your attitude changed? And 4 options. I will explain them because they need a bit of explanation. The first one is, yes, I'm going to get a lot more organized with this. So, wow, I've heard some interesting things and I know I need to get my act together. Yes, but actually, this has just reinforced basically what I thought. I feel I'm doing the right kind of things. So, yes, it's woken me up, but I think I'm doing okay. Then both the no's are no, actually, it hasn't really, listening today hasn't really changed me because I was already on all of this. I was feeling pretty good about it. Or no, I don't buy into any of this stuff. I'm not really into this. So that's good. So it's actually good that we're just getting through this. I won't steal the thunder. I won't tell you what the results are. Okay, so let's share these now, and probably not unpredictably, not too many people are. In fact, only one person. Well, nobody has said this is a waste of time, which is good. Thank you, because otherwise you really would have wasted the last hour of your lives. One person has said that they think actually they were already there, but most people are saying, okay, fine, cool. Yeah, I'm learning some stuff, and that is good. And then just a couple of follow-up polls just to help us at Firestarter understand what we should do next with this topic. So the next question is, do you think it's worth doing another Firestarter Forum on this topic in a couple of months? So we know it's a really large topic. We know it can explode in all kinds of different directions. We've got plenty of people that can talk about this stuff. But we similarly do not want to do it to death. I always love seeing these before you guys do. Okay, let's share these results. So we've got a couple of people saying, no, please stop this. But most people are saying, yes, please, we want to see more of this stuff. So thank you. Leave that with us. We're building program constantly. As you know, people who've been coming to these for a while, we try to keep it relevant in as much as we try to pick topics of the day rather than over programming it. But at the same time, when we know there's a good theme that people want, we of course will adjust to that. And then finally, simple question. This question is, what should Matt Wheeler do this afternoon? Which is it worth us, Firestarter, putting together a toolkit to summarize some of the key tips from today? Excellent. Keep it going, people. Keep him busy. This is what we like. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Brilliant. So yeah, let's. So it looks like let's share these results. So Matt Wheeler has voted not to do this, I suspect, and everybody else has said, Matt, it would be really helpful if you could put some stuff together and send it out. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. I've now completely badly played this because having shamelessly teased Matt Wheeler, I'm now going to actually invite him onto the screen. So that was bad planning. Let's go. Hi, Matt. How are you?
You can go off, people.
Right. Yeah, you can go off, people. I know. Right. So let's do this. What we're going to do now is we're going to just spend a bit of time. How long have we got? We got sort of 10, 15 minutes or so. We're going to spend a bit of time just getting a bit of feedback from around and about the place. And what we're also going to do is we'll invite Rachel back onto the screen. So watch us get clever. And if we've got some, so Matt's going to, hello, Rachel, good to see you again. And then what we shall also do, as and when we will get other people to come and join us as well. Watch us get really clever. We're nailing this now. Matt, over to you. What should we talk about?
Oh, there's so much to talk about. My cat has gone mad. Lots of questions for you, Rachel. Lots of really good feedback on both your presentation and also on Dan's thoughts on Maslow. Congratulations on all of that. But I think one of the kind of really sort of strong feelings is that it's very difficult for leaders to be able to engage with their teams when they're working remotely and kind of test the temperature of how people are feeling. And certainly in my group, there was a lot of talk about employees actually find it difficult to share their problems, and they don't want to sort of burden people. So it becomes incumbent upon the employer to actually be proactive in finding out what's going on, how people are dealing with the issues that they're facing. And I mean, we've talked about this in forums before. I know Richard Clark, who's on today, has done things like a kind of simple happy, not happy type survey. And there's other things that businesses have put up there as sort of good models. But Rachel, I guess from your experience, have you seen any sort of specific sort of thoughts or ideas on how employers are starting to kind of move towards that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have. And I think staff surveys are a good aspect. I think, surveying your staff can help with that and get a feel for it, but equally it can be a double-edged sword. So you have to be a bit careful with those as well. One thing that came out of our room, which I think was really useful, is not having those conversations with the boss, but having like a buddy system with somebody of your level, a peer level, that you are checking in with daily, especially if you're working remotely. And talking about resource sharing and sharing the workload. And I think those sort of things can help alleviate some of those stress valves for people and give them a forum in which they can discuss things. And then again, it's just coming back to those outlets that I said about. You can have things in place, your health and safety policies, your whistleblowing policies, which help employees know their formal routes for venting frustrations or issues, but equally having those staff committees, wellbeing committees, where they're a bit more informal, not run by the bosses, they're run by somebody, each representative from the cleaners to the PAs, right up to a director level, and somebody's in each representing each body in your organisation can be really useful as well, just to people feel able to share their views in a safe environment.
Like it.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's a really, really nice idea.
And then there's again a lot of sort of chat coming through about employers kind of making sure that people are working in a safe environment, and also that their sort of their workstations are suitable to their health. And I had a question from Claire Smith, actually, who would be good if Claire, if you could come on screen, if you wouldn't mind, just asking a little bit about how we can actually ensure that that is suitable for people, so that that they don't they're not getting bad backs and things like that.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to. I think I'm one of the ones that said we're not organised with it. We're trying to do the best, and we have introduced kind of yoga sessions, buddy systems, to check in on people. And it's a small team, so communication is key. But it's my question is, we're all working in different places, dining room tables, and how do you actually go into somebody's home work? Is there any policy on it?
We missed the end of your sentence, Claire. We had a choppy moment. How do you go into people's homes?
Is there obviously we can't go into people's homes to check, their setup is right, and their seating is right, and their station is in the right place. So is there a checklist, or is there a formalised policy of checking workstations? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Oh, you're back on. Yeah, you're fine, I think.
No, back?
Yeah.
Yeah, Claire, it's part of your health and safety obligations, but again, it really depends on the resources of you as an employer. The bigger employers are expected to have those specific risk assessment Zoom calls with their working staff, saying, look, where are you working? Have you got all the equipment you need? And sometimes that can be simple. If you just set aside a 15-minute conversation for somebody in admin, operations, facilities to have that conversation with the staff and say, look, actually, that's not the best setup. Is there anything else you can do? Or would you benefit from a chair, an ergonomic chair? Or do you need a separate keyboard with your laptop so that you're not hunched into your laptop? Simple things can sometimes make huge amounts of difference. So again, I think it's just about opening up that dialogue and working out what you can proportionately and reasonably do for your business with your resource.
Yeah, I think I might actually do that on a team Zoom meeting that we have regularly, every day, a daily catch up, and it'd be good to actually say, can you all share what you're doing, and let's see if as directors of the company we can help and support you. But that could be
excellent.
A Zoom.
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant.
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, Claire. Matthew.
So we also had an interesting kind of take on sort of Dan's thoughts on Maslow, and if Doug Elliott could come on screen, he's got an interesting question. The where the legal responsibility ends as you go further up the pyramid, or as you go further around the wheel, and just interesting to get your thoughts on that, Rachel, just to see your take on that interpretation. So there you go. I've had enough to get done.
I was hoping you would reword my question better than I put it in the chat, actually, Matt, but I'll give it a go. So I was really interested to sort of put the two inputs together, and wondered from a legal perspective whether you thought that the Maslow model could be seen as, if the minimum requirement legally fits into that Maslow model. So the bottom two levels, which were sort of red and amber, is that where our legal responsibility? Obviously, we all want to do the best.
Oh, here we go. Let's nearly. Oh, so close. You'll find it. We'll find it.
Does the question make sense?
I'm struggling to remember.
Right.
So is that
Brilliant.
Does the dotted white line represent the end of our legal responsibilities to create wellness and a safe environment, or do we now have a legal responsibility for those other things like self-esteem?
Almost, I would say. I think it's almost a line, isn't it? I think, but I think we've got to look at it holistically in the round, and I still don't think you can kind of knock out one of those, because if your culture's not working and you're setting a bad culture and not leading by example, then the other things in the pyramid start to fall down. So I still think there is a holistic view, and I think again we've got to lead by example. I know a chap at a very high-end accountancy firm. He's the lead CEO. He's moved to a 9-day fortnight in how he works. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, because that's how he finds that he can be the most productive and have that long weekend. And he's still giving huge amounts of output to the business. But that's a culture shift. So that comes above that white line. What more can I say? I think you've got to just not pigeonhole things too much.
And I also just reflect back on your point of earlier, which has obviously struck a chord with me, about the fact that different employee demographics may require different treatments as well. So, and that is a really kind of significant point. So, Doug, very nice to see you, sir. Right, Matthew, we've probably got time for one, possibly two more ideas.
One quick one then, because you mentioned earlier, Rachel, about the possibility of mandating vaccines in an organisation, and I think that sort of struck a chord with a lot of people who asked the question, "Oh, can you do that?"
Yeah. Well, yes, you can say, I want my staff to be vaccinated. It's what the government want us to do. It's been deemed safe, but the government themselves haven't mandated it. So it's a really difficult one. So I'm going to say, yes, you can proactively say, I want you to be vaccinated. But in reality, if somebody does say no, then there's not an awful lot legally you'll be able to do unless that is totally unreasonable. So I think you've got to deal with each objection to having the vaccine on a case-by-case basis. What is their issue for not doing it? Is it health? Is it myths around what's inside the vaccine? Is it religious beliefs? Is it because they're a vegan? All of those will prompt a different response from the business. So just drill down with that employee as to why they're not. But ultimately, yes, you can have a policy that says we're encouraging staff, we're going to give you time off to go and get the vaccine, things like that, paid time off. All of those sort of things will help you navigate them into the right place.
Presumably, one of the lines of thought is, we, the employer, do not want you coming onto our premises unless you've had the vaccine. Yeah, as a line of thought, and I think that's, well, as you say, it's legally blurry, isn't it? I guess. Yeah. Right, Matthew. Last question.
Okay, so it'd be great if we could go back to Dan actually, because he's just put into the chat something about fun cop, nice cop, which I think would be quite a fun thing to finish on actually, just to because there's lots of people sort of asking about ways in which to survey staff and give them forums to talk. So Dan, that one sounds like a good one.
But we agreed rules when COVID first started about what we were going to be to everybody within the team. So myself and our design director, the fun cops. So we tried to chivvy everyone up and keep them buoyed. So we just thought ooze positivity. But then we made it also very clear that our COO was there as a very soft, gentle, here to listen, ring us at any time kind of thing, so that she does regular calls in with people, make sure that they're feeling okay and is there anything we can be doing. And then sort of I'm trying to think where I was going with that, and I think the last thing we were sort of doing with it was
there's an ask me anything thing that you talked about as well, Dan.
Oh yeah, so we do an AMA. So we've set up 3 tools. We've got Zoom, obviously, for our communication this way. We've got Slack for sort of more casual chats, and then email, obviously, for more formal stuff. And on the Slack, we've got sort of fairly jokey channels where we can mess around on stuff. But each month we do like an Ask Me Anything, so that if anyone's concerned about stuff, because you know what it's like, rumors just start to percolate and escalate quite rapidly within the business. So we've got it as an opportunity for people to just ask us outright, you know, am I going to lose my job, or are we going to go into furlough and things like that? And I will answer them as honestly as I can, basically.
Excellent, brilliant. All of you, I'm just going to say thank you for your. It saves me a job actually, because I was going to thank you all, but now I'm just going to thank you all and say thank you. Brilliant job, perfect. And Dave as well, thank you. Paddy and Stephen on the production, amazing job. Sorry, we keep trying to make it harder and harder for you. Appreciate you just absolutely knocking it out of the park. So I'm just going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Brilliant. I really think that was a good session. I think proof is in the pudding that it could have run and run. Obviously, we're continuing to evolve these forums. We've got lots of ideas, which we will communicate on. Next month, I think we're doing a bit of a technology focus, more on that in the comms that goes out over the next few weeks. Please do keep tuning in. It's been a great one today. Thank you very much to everybody. Have a great rest of your day. See you soon, people.